In today's video, we are making the masterpiece of every sourdough baker. We are going to make an open crumb wheat bread. For this, you want to have a very healthy starter. Your bread should ferment in a short period of time. You don't want your starter to be too sour. You have to get the bulk fermentation exactly right. And on top of that, you have to create superb strength in your dough. Only then this works. Because your bread also contains more water than on average. And this means we have to be very careful with reading all the signs during the whole process. Shaping also becomes a little bit harder because your bread is so wet. But yeah, let me show you the whole process, and I hope you're enjoying this video.
Let's get started. And you might think this is obvious, but I'm showing you how to feed your sourdough starter. You want to have a healthy starter. I'm feeding it a 1:2 ratio. So I'm taking 1 part of starter, which in this case is 30 grams, 35 grams, and I'm mixing that with another 70 grams of flour and another 70 grams of water. I'm using whole wheat flour. Then you want to make sure that that is able to double in size within 5 hours. And if it does, then you're ready for the next steps. And the next steps are, I'm already showing it to you right here. I'm mixing flour and water. So that's 500 grams of flour, strong bread flour, and 400 grams of water. We will be letting that sit for an hour. So I mixed everything. I mixed the starter around 4 hours ago now, and then in another hour this is ready and the starter is also ready and we can proceed. And you can see my starter doubled in size. It looks nice and bubbly after the 5 hours. So now we are now ready to put everything together. Have a look at how much the autolysis did. Wet your hands a little bit and just pull that dough and look at that nice window pane effect. Good looking dough. And we did not really have to knead. We just stirred everything together. The next step starts, which is now adding your salt and your starter to the actual dough. So that's right, a sourdough bread typically only consists of salt, water, and flour. And our sourdough starter, which also only consists of flour and water. And the microbacteria, of course, and the yeast. So, not very fancy. I'm just taking that and I'm putting that together. I'm kneading it. I want to make sure that everything is nicely incorporated. There's not really a special technique about it. So this is how it looks like after around 2 hours of just putting everything together. And next up is we will be doing some bench kneading after around 15 minutes of just letting it sit. Again, let me show you how well the dough developed, looking very nice. So if your dough does not look like this, try again. You probably screwed something up. Everything depends on this creation of strength. So if your dough does not look like this at this stage, something is wrong. You can just take your dough and bake it in a loaf pan later on. You will not get that open crumb bread. Up till this point, everything has to be perfect. This is why this dough is so annoying. It's so much work, and every step has to be executed perfectly. Now I'm doing some bench kneading. I'm basically using the tension of the surface to stick the dough on top of each other. And by doing so, I'm creating superb amounts of strength. Don't use any flour. You want to use that sticky surface. That's really the trick. I'm recording this a little bit later, the audio. Do I have a sunburn? So very German of me. So let's just take that, put that dough together. I'm using my bench scraper. I'm flipping it over. And this is creating superb amounts of strength. And just have a look how nicely the dough is staying together. It does not fall apart that quickly. It stays in its shape. It wants to stay in its shape. And this is exactly what you need. This means we developed a proper gluten network, which is what we want. So again, with this open crumb bread, every step has to be executed perfectly. If your dough does not look like this, then probably you did something wrong in the earlier steps. You might want to try again. I probably baked this bread around 1,000 times, just trying this trying to perfect the formula. And I can tell you, I failed so many times. But to get that open crumb, you really have to have perfect management over all the parameters. I just like to round it up a little bit, almost like if we were to pre-shape it. I like to use this to also practice the pre-shaping. Because in the pre-shaping, in the end, when our dough is nice and gassy, there is no room for error. Right now, we just fermented the dough for a little bit, so screwing something up right now is not that big of a mistake. All right, let's take this dough, put it back to the container, and then we will be waiting another 15 minutes. And next up is the next step, the next way to create superb amounts of strength. This is called lamination. But some sourdough people are saying this is also just called bench folding. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the dough, I'm removing it from the container with wetted hands. Now I'll be spreading out a little bit of water on my surface. Not too much, because again, we want the dough to stick to the surface, but we also don't want it to stick too much. Now you take out the dough. Look how easily I was able to lift the dough from the container. And what you do is you take out the dough and you fold it flat on the surface. You lay it out flat on the surface, and then we will fold it on top of each other. And by doing so, the sticky sides of the dough will stick together. So the dough is going to stick together with all that stickiness that you can see right here. And you see already how much of a gluten network we developed. The dough just stays together like that. We can tear it like this, looking very, very good and healthy already. If your dough does not look like this, again, something probably went wrong during the earlier stages. When I make a rye bread, this is just so much easier, but this dough is really so much work. Now I'm taking the dough, I'm folding it on top of each other, also known as a four-fold, the same when you would be baking croissants. Now I take the other side again, fold that into the middle, and then I'll fold everything on top of each other. And are you excited whether the dough stays together or not? Look at this dough. This is really satisfying when you came to this point and everything just stays together. The dough is nice. Then you know, okay, this is going to be the good basis for a nice piece of bread. Again, I'm applying my pre-shaping magic. I just like to round it up a little bit. And this is also a good way to just train pre-shaping. And have a look. Dough stays together despite its high hydration. Taking the dough, and now the bulk fermentation starts. And during the bulk fermentation, I'm applying hourly coil folds. This depends also a little bit on the time. If I go out, if I meet up with friends, then I might not be doing all the coil folds, but typically I would do them once every hour. I'm using water again to remove the dough from the edges of the container, and then I start by folding the dough on top of itself. This is known coil fold, as the technique is known as coil fold. I have another video. I'll be linking it right here. Same thing again, around an hour later, another coil fold. And you can see that the dough is already looking a little bit bubblier. In my experience, I noticed the largest increase in size typically towards the end of the bulk fermentation. You have to finish the bulk fermentation exactly on point when the dough doubled in size. This also takes a little bit of a feeling. You need to have fermented a couple of doughs to get this feeling. Sometimes you feel, oh wow, this dough is already so fluffy and bubbly. If you bulk ferment too long with sourdough, your dough is just going to turn into a sticky nightmare mess. So you want to finish the bulk fermentation within a time window of around 30 minutes or so. And you want to max that out. You want to gas up your dough as much as possible. If you bulk ferment too short, you will not have that open crumb. If you bulk ferment too long, it's going to be a sticky mess. All right, let's get started. You already saw the dough came together a little bit more. I'm already rice flouring my Benetton. Rice flour works best because rice flour will absorb a lot of that hydration. Let's have a look at my dough. It doubled in size. It looks nice and bubbly. And then we will be pre-shaping it. You could be skipping the pre-shaping part since we only have one piece of dough, but I actually like to do it because this is going to even out the crumb a little bit more. Look at those nice bubbles here at the dough, on top of the dough. The dough came together very, very well. Probably it could have bulk fermented just a little bit longer, but in my experience, rather bulk ferment a little bit less than too much. You can basically proof your dough just a little bit longer to compensate for the too short bulk. But the dough is just looking very, very, very nice, smooth and silky. So let's take out the dough and place it on the surface. You can see those nice bubbles in the dough already. Now with wetted hands, we will start pre-shaping. Some shape the bread directly, but I like to just even out the crumb a little bit more. If you want to have super, super big pockets of air, irregular, then this is probably something you would not want to do. Pre-shaping. So I'm taking the bench scraper just like we did in the earlier steps, and I'm just taking the dough and I'm tucking it over the surface. I'm using the tension of the surface to round up the dough. And you don't want to pre-shape too much because then you already degas your dough. So just a little bit, as much as is needed to get a nice looking round piece of dough. Gentle tap, Mr. Dough, please make me a nice bread. I'll be speeding up things a little bit. I give the dough around 5 to 10 minutes of bench rest where the gluten just has some chance to stretch. Because we pre-shaped that gluten is very, very dense, it will be hard to shape. Let's get started. In this step, we will be using flour. Not before, just only in this step. Sprinkle your dough with a little bit of flour because the sticky side, which is upwards, is going to be at the bottom, and we don't want that side to stick to the surface now. We don't want that side to tear. With the dough scraper, take the dough, lift it over. Now add a little bit more flour, tuck it below the dough. We really don't want that to stick. And now basically the sticky side faces us and we will be folding the dough on the sticky side. Booyah! Tuck it down gently, not too much. We don't want to degas the dough. And again, take that and flip it over, making it stick to the other side. And rotate it, and then start rolling the dough on top of itself. I'm tucking in some more flour. This makes it a little bit easier. Again, here, you want to have the perfect balance of not too much and not too little. Take it, flip it outwards, and then roll it on top of itself, fold it down, keep rolling it. You see me rolling, and this only works because I used a little bit of flour. That's why it does not stick too much. At the bottom, the dough sticks to the surface. No worries. We will be using that to our advantage. Nice looking dough, nicely rolled up. And yeah, that's basically already dough. You can use the bench scraper to just give it a nicer shape. We will be baking a batard. A boule is round, a batard has this shape. And now our dough needs to rest. The final stage starts, the proofing stage. What I like to do sometimes to control the bulk fermentation, I take a small jar and I place it in the same room where my dough ferments, and I take just a small piece after the lamination and I mark it, and this way I can see whether the dough doubled in size during bulk fermentation. This makes it very easy. We take the dough, flip it upside down, place it in a Benetton, and now what I do is I like to stitch the dough together a little bit more. This works if you did not use too much flour in the steps before. If you use too much flour, chances are it might not work like it does for me right now. But don't worry. I just like to do this because then the dough will hold the shape a little bit better. all this work for the open crumb. Let's do a finger poke test, and you can see the dent comes back up. The dough is not ready yet. We will be proofing the dough at room temperature for around 2 hours until it passes the finger poke test, almost passes the finger poke test, and then we will be taking this dough and put it into the fridge overnight for another 8 hours. So let me cover this up, and then the dough will go and sleep. I like to use a plastic bag because then the dough stays nice and humid. But you could also use a kitchen towel if you wanted to. Proofing is super, super, super important. And for me, it works best to proof it until it passes the finger poke test almost. And I'll show you exactly how that looks like in a second. And then in the fridge, another 8 hours. So find a spot where there's a little bit of flour and put your finger inside, and you can see the dent comes out much, much slower, and it almost does not recover. So this dough seems ready. Now we will be using another trick. The fridge will slow down the whole fermentation process, but the gas becomes cold. And the moment the gas becomes warm inside of the oven, our dough is going to burst up. It's going to burst up like a volcano. That's why I like to use the fridge. Sorry for the messy fridge here. And butter, of course. We Germans love the butter. All right, so I'm preparing the oven the next morning. I have a stone, but you could also just use a tray. I'm preheating everything to max temperature, including a small bowl, which I had at the bottom. This is my preheated oven. So much smoke. Now I'm placing another tray over the stone or your other tray, because this tray is going to trap some of that steam. That's why it should be a little bit deeper, the tray ideally. We will be taking out the dough now. Hello, Mr. Dough. Good morning. This is the dough the next morning. It did not increase that much more in size, but now the gas inside of the dough is cold. Exactly what we wanted. I'll be taking out the stone now, and then I'll take the dough and place the dough on the stone. I like to sprinkle a little bit of semolina flour on the dough. You could also use regular flour, because sometimes I had issues with the dough stuck to the stone, despite it being preheated. So just to be careful. Now take your banneton and just flip it over gently on the stone. Be gentle to your dough. You want to be gentle. You don't want to degas your dough. Now the scoring starts. Scoring. I've screwed up so many times with scoring. But basically you want to take a sharp knife or a lame, I don't know how to say this, I'm sorry. And take it and cut your bread at a 45-degree angle. You can add a little bit of decorations here. I like to do that. I find that looks quite cool. Yes, I'm having issues with my tool here. Take it. This is just for decoration. Don't cut too deep. We don't want this to create oven spring. We want the main cut to go open. Scoring is super important. Basically, at that weak spot we created, the bread is going to expand in the oven. Now, I placed the dough back inside, and now I'm pouring boiling water into the lower bowl. And this will be trapped below the top tray. During half the bake, 230 degrees Celsius, after around 20 minutes, I'm removing the source of water. I'm also removing the top tray. And let's have a look at the dough after the second half of the bake without steam. Good looking dough. Wow, look at that ear. Look at those nice bubbles. Those you get when you bake with a lot of hydration. Let's go for the crumb. Let's see the crumb shot. Make sure that your bread has been resting for at least an hour. You don't want it to be too warm when you slice it, else you'll just tear it apart. And voila, beautiful looking open crumb. Not too irregular. I really like this kind of style on the crumb. And another shot here after I slice it. I enjoyed it with butter and some cheese. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This, in my opinion, is really the most difficult bread to bake. So don't give up. Give it a couple of shots And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for watching.